So we want to open the international symposium paradigm shifts towards sustainability. We have so many guests and audience today. So next, please. Yeah. So for audience, we have a Q&A session at the discussion time. So for Zoom audience, please use Q&A function. Yeah. So of course you can use the chat, but the Q&A function will be more preferable. And if we cannot answer all questions, we will try to answer at the website later. And this session will be recorded and be accessible for all of them, all of you at the website. So please check later. Next, please. Okay, so today I want ask Hotta-san to chair this session, and then we have so many very, very attractive speakers. And then the next, please. So this session is a part of the Three Links, the conference. The next Three Links conference will be held March 14 to March 18. So please put in your mind and keep schedule on your notebook. So today's session is a kind of the autumn session. So for preparing Three Links 2022. So you can find out several good topics from today's session. Okay, so okay, so thank you very much for all. So Hotta-san, would you please start chairing the session?
Yeah, thank you, Asari-san. So I'd like to share my introductory slide. So yeah, can you see my slides? Okay. So the objective of this session is to discuss the emerging policy and technology trends to impact sustainability and also impact the waste management. And we observed like a new, the very ambitious goal setting, such as SDGs, or like decarbonization or net zero society, or like zero plastic pollution discharge under the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. Those very long-term ambitious goals definitely will impact the society as well as the activities of the experts. Not only that, we see that the rapid spread of the digital-based technology, digital-based information, digital-based business models. So this would also impact our society and expectation to the expert group. Then we actually see such large change in society through COVID-19 pandemic. We see changes in plastic use. We see changes in our lifestyle through digital technology. It is happening now. So what we want to ask the experts from the different backgrounds, including business, is that how these trends are making impacts to creating the opportunities for circular economy. And is there any increasing challenges and risks for waste management? Or is there any emerging expectation to academic and experts' work? So by doing that, we like to identify a new trend, new expectation for the research society like us and also Korean society, and then other international experts. The reason why I'm saying this is not the only happening now. I did some analysis on the expansion of sustainable consumption production related agenda, but that has been shifted and expanded over past 3 decades. So it started from pollution prevention, cleaner production related concept, and then like implementation of the policy related to that. That has expanded to resource efficiency, life cycle thinking, some sort of the idea how by increasing material and energy efficiency, we can overcome sustainability related challenge. But as we all know, those approach also had the limitation, especially current challenges are more on the how to transform our society and technology. So it's more about how to make sustainable lifestyle, how to make a social technical system more sustainable, and then how to include the social related considerations as we observed from this COVID-19 related pandemic. Other point I'd like to raise was that we are very familiar with the life cycle thinking, like shown in the left side of this slide. So there is a life cycle of the materials and resources. And then the waste management recycling experts are very much familiarized and then try to contribute to prevent waste and then pollution related challenge happening in different stages of the life cycles and try to develop some new policy instruments to prevent. But I think the new policy design is necessary in addition to this life cycle thinking to envision a concrete image of the future society, policy support for model cases and the social experimentation, and facilitating creative process among stakeholders. So we are seeing some paradigm shift in policy design and then on waste management. So what we like to listen to from you is what are the opportunities for circular economy in the near future? And what are the major challenges for waste management circular economy in your topic? And what kind of academic and practical research will be useful in the future? So we have very excellent experts who can cover topics like plastics, decarbonization, COVID-19, disaster-related issue, digital transformation. So I hope this session will shed the light to these very ambitious, difficult questions. So that's my introductory remark. So I'd like to first invite Professor Rhee from Kyonggi University as a keynote on global trends and perspectives on plastic waste policy. So we'd like to listen to his very rich experience in this field and also Korean society's experience. So Professor Rhee, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hotta and Professor Asari, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Seung-Whee Rhee, working in Kyonggi University, Korea. Today, I'd like to mention about global trend and perspectives on plastic waste policy. As you know, policy is very important. You must examine this area in in-depth analysis because the policy is controlled of everything, I think. So this is table contains the introduction and background and principle of plastic waste management, global trend and perspectives on plastic waste policy. And finally, I like to make a summary for that. First one is introduction. And plastic can be used to produce various products. It's a lot of application due to its high functionalities and flexibilities. And plastic is strong. Also, it's very light. And the other one is it's very cheap. So everybody in the world want to use the plastic. That is the reason the amount of global plastic produced in 2015 is 407 million tons was produced. It is expected to increase to 1,600 million tons in 2050. So it still increase every year by every year. So the increasing plastic waste has become an urgent environmental issue, such as resource waste problems, marine plastic litter issues, and climate changes. These two figures show the plastic waste pollution in the ocean, in the ecosystems. This is that board on here. The plastic waste pollution was estimated by mass or mismanaged plastic waste. This table was reported by the JAMPAC in 2015, published by the Science. The plastic waste input from the land into the ocean. This is the global ranking of the countries. And number one is China. And second is Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Thailand. And still number 20 is United States of America. So those Asian countries is mainly contribute to pollution by the plastic waste. This is the example of Philippines. In 2015, the UN and international community adopt 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure the prosperity. Some goals of SDG are related to plastic waste management, and active plastic waste management is required to achieve SDGs. Also in Basel Convention, plastic waste partnership, including European Union, United Kingdom, China, and Japan are preparing various policies to improve and promote the environmental sound and management of plastic waste at the global, regional, and national levels, and to prevent and minimize its generation. In this presentation, I'd like to talk about the global trend of perspectives on plastic waste policy to exchange the information of opportunities and challenges on policies in the future. This is SDGs in plastic waste management, and goal number 6, goal number 7, goal number 8, goal number 12, 13, 14, etc. So what is the principle of plastic waste management? So you already know about the hierarchy of plastic waste management and reduction, reuse, recycling, energy recovery, and property disposal. To achieve this hierarchy, and the principle of plastic waste management in Korea is the number 1 is prevention. And number 2 is pollution pay transfers, we call the 3 Ps. Number 3 is the BAT, best available technology use. Number 4 is sustainable development. Number 5 is integrated management of waste treatment facilities. So that is using the principles we manage the plastic waste. So what is the global trend of plastic waste policy? In EU, 2015, lightweight plastic carrier bag was controlled. reduction the consumption of plastic carrier bag that is controlled the thickness to 50 micrometers or less. Also, they control the consumption, and they control the everybody reduce the plastic carrier bags. 2019, they used the 90 plastic carrier bag for each person. 2025 is going down to 40 plastic carrier bags per person. So it's more than 50% reduced. Another directives is reduction on certain plastic products. There are so many target items in here in consumption reductions and restriction on the market and EPR systems to recycle plastics. There are so many items on here. So recycling plastic content is at least 25% in 2025. It's going up to at least 30% in 2030. Also, they got some kind of plastic tax regulation. So that is the biggest one. It's 0.8 euro per kilogram from 2021, this year. For plastic packaging waste that is not recycled. If you use the ton, it's a unit is ton, that is 800 euros. That is the biggest amount, I think. In USA, they have also plastic waste policy. They apply the virgin resin fee under the Reduce Act. Reduce means rewarding efforts to decrease unrecycling contaminants in ecosystem act. So virgin resin fee is applied 10 cents per pound in 2022. It's going up 15 cents per pound 2023 and 40 cents per pound 2024. So they use the, it's a kind of the economic system to reduce the virgin resin or the plastic waste. Also, they control the single-use plastic regulation in some states in New Jersey, Vermont, Hawaii, and DC, and Seattle, and something like that. Also in China, they got the plastic waste policy. 2008, China has plastic bag ban, prohibition of free plastic bags in retailers. 2017, waste import ban. It started 2017, but this year, end of 2021, all waste was banned to import into China. The plastic recycling standard, they also got the recycled plastic, then with the quality standard. 2021, also they have the 5-year roadmap established, including prohibition of non-degradable plastic bags, single-use plastic utensils, single-use plastic in hotels, and plastic postal courier package. So this is very, very strong regulation. So we want to discuss about that is opportunity, and that is also there is challenges on that. In Japan, resources circulation strategies for plastic in 2019 to reduce 25% reduction in single-use plastic by 2030. That is mandatory fee for each plastic bag, 3 to 5 yen is Japanese currency from 2020. The target of treatment is 60% rate of recycling. for containers and packaging by 2030, 100 effective utilization of used plastic by 2035. This is target the Japan established roadmap for the bioplastic introduction 2021. That is 4 measures on here. The first one is the R&D system for 5 years from start on 2020. And the other one is support to the installation of manufacturing facilities, support for the fundraising, and research and follows upon introduction status and bioplastic by application and materials. This is the Japan plastic waste policy. In Korea, we established the measures for plastic reduction and recycling in 2020 through the life cycle of plastic from producing to recycling. The target of plastic waste management, generation reduction 50% and recycling 70% in 2030. So using the life cycle of plastics, produce, distribution, consumption, discharge, and recycling. Every step we got the policies. That is pretty strong and big burden to the government, to the industry, and to the consumption. So that is very important. So I don't have enough time to explain this one. You must see that. And perspectives on plastic waste policy. What is the perspectives? That is short-term perspectives. Many countries have promulgated regulation and laws on plastic management, and more countries will strengthen plastic management, plastic waste management. Main policy on plastic waste are applied to each life cycle of plastic from generation to recycling in the comprehensive strategies: generation, distribution, consumption, discharge, recycle. This is the short-term perspectives. We must think about these life cycles. Mid-term perspectives, that is, the one is the quality standard for recycling plastic, including flags. Also, import and export of recycling materials is important for quality standards. It is necessary to examine the method of certification and investigation for flag qualities. The other one is the chemical recycling technologies. On focus on low-grade plastics such as plastic packaging and residues. High quality grade is reused and using the mechanical recycling. But chemical recycling is applied to low-grade plastic waste. So that is another the challenges, issues. Long-term perspectives, it is impossible for plastic to disappear completely due to their usefulness and the use of new materials such as bioplastic is expected to increase in the future. So that is another new design for new alternatives. That is one is alternatives is bioplastics. So we think about that. So I like to make a summary for that. Global trend in plastic waste policy is mainly focused on the restriction of plastic use and economic measures. Many countries are announcing policies on plastic waste, and global trend is reduction, economic measures, alternatives, recycling. and perspectives on plastic waste policy. For short term, strengthening the plastic waste policy is the comprehensive strategy. Medium term is develop the chemical recycling technology, certification and quality standard for recycled plastic. Long term means develop of new materials such as bioplastic. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Rhee. Thank you, Professor Rhee, for very comprehensive perspective on the needs for the plastic-related policy from the life cycle perspective, as well as this short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals for the plastic-related research. This is very useful. And then also for the informing us about policy trend from the different countries, including US, EU, Japan, Korea, and China. And but also we observe that now that the UN is discussing a global agreement on plastics. So how does it impact in the future? I'd like to listen to your opinion in the future, but later. But let's come to the Costas first. Dr. Costas Velis is from University of Leeds, but also he's very well known for his tool to estimate the marine plastic pollution. So Costas.
Thank you so much, Hotta-san. I hope you can hear my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
I'm trying to make it happen. Okay, so put it in full screen now. So thank you so much. And I think it follows nicely my presentation from Professor Rhee's presentation, which was very informative. In the next few minutes, I would like to focus on plastics, and especially the plastics pollution related and waste management issues, and casting light on that based on the efforts we have been doing to quantify them and how this relates to the circular economy, as this is our topic. I would like to remind us that we've been working on that for many, many years now, at least starting with the report we have released more than 6 years ago, saying that all the exports of plastics to recycling to China wasn't really sustainable and would see a crisis. And indeed, this crisis happened, and even happened earlier than we've been warning to, but nobody would listen some 6 years ago. Since then, a lot has happened and a lot of information has changed. So working from the reality of the material science, going that to circular economy, linking it to global benchmarking, and linking formal and informal systems to plastics pollution, I think are some of the key things that we could see advances. And to that, not only by the plastic pollution calculator that Hotta-san has been mentioning, but we work with 4 major modeling and quantification methodologies on plastics pollution. And I'm going to talk very briefly about, again, the results of the only global model we're having that links plastic pollution with waste management and circular economy on a global model in a dynamic way. And that's the plastic torsion model that was released in Science almost a year ago and remains a state of the art, absolutely. And what it tells us is that, yes, circular economy, different aspects have a key role in the to mitigate plastics pollution. It is possible, but we need so much effort in that direction to make it happen. And that poses a huge challenge because we know very little how to make this happen, actually, both in terms of what are the right policies, but also the technological shift. And Professor Rhee has mentioned some of them. I think the realities are far more complex on the ground, and we don't know the effectiveness of any of those things. But the other thing that we don't know is that in the circular economy, we have to use across the life cycle, but the different parts of the supply chain or the ecosystem are not really aligned in terms of their profitability, in terms of their objectives. So how can make them work all together? We have no clue about it. We introduce these horizontal measures, but these are impacting different actors in different ways. And I'll now move to a new model that we're just about to release globally. It is a dynamic one that tells us how exactly the world is linking the local to the global, and is telling us how we can understand the leakage of the plastics in the environment in a much better way. And we will be redefining these values that Professor Hotta has been mentioning, that we're going to be seeing a much different reality on the ground. So the model SPOT is using the most comprehensive databases. We have an issue with waste data. They're not good enough if we're going to do that. And we put a lot of effort in bringing them together and clearing. And we doing state-of-the-art understanding of how the materials is moving into the environment. We don't know much about it. We're using artificial intelligence, and we're linking to the Sustainable Development 11.6.1. Now, if we want to link the local to the global, think that around almost 100,000 municipalities across the world, and how you can understand the reality in each of them, we cannot. That's why we need artificial intelligence algorithms to, if you like, to estimate things in places where we don't have numbers. With the SPOT model, for example, we're able to look at very detailed using both the anthropogenic socioeconomic conditions on waste arisings, plastics arisings, but also calculate the stock in the environment for the very first time. And you can see here is an early example of the application of the model, give us the very first global estimate of the Sustainable Development Goal 11.6.1, which tell us how the waste is managed across the world at municipality level, and this is linked then to the plastics pollution. One key dimension that the world is forgetting, and is really important in the pending global treaty, I would say, to realize, is that a lot of waste that doesn't end up in our waters or land, it is because it's burnt in the open. Now, this is also another aspect of the plastic pollution. It's totally unacceptable, and you can see the evidence in the review we have published on how this is damaging public health, occupational health, and wider environmental damage that is caused. So we have to see the both aspects of the plastics pollution, not just what ends into the water. Okay, so new challenges. We have to find data on waste management. We have to find data on plastics pollution, especially on open burning, for example. But then where we fit this data to be used to inform policy, national, regional, international, global. There are a lot of efforts, and for example, at the University of Leeds, we're having MOUs now with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste and the Global Marine Litter Partnership, but there are more efforts that are linked to. So we're seeing a data revolution. We do need a data revolution in waste management. It's not happening. Hopefully, the plastic pollution marine litter will lead us, will enable us to understand the importance and utility to obtain and generate reliable data from the ground and from modeling ground truth on the ground through validation processes. Then these can let us to policy incentives that are efficient and cost effective. At the moment, all those policies, I think they're good, but can be really challenged because there are so many gaps in our understanding. So I will conclude on, interestingly, some challenges I think resonate nicely and bring a dialogue with Professor Rhee's also focus. I think we're having a big challenge on the circularity and waste management in the global south. And a lot of the policies that you've seen are for the developed countries, but the biggest contributions on the plastics pollution, the leakage comes from the places where they don't have good waste management systems or any at all. There is an aspiration that the marine litter prevention, a considerable amount as shown in the plastics torsion model, will be accomplished through circularity measures. But this is the area that we know the least. And we had huge failures on the more easier aspects on just mechanical recycling of plastics or even reuse of it across the world. So I would question the effectiveness of those measures, and we need to assess it much more carefully. There's a lot of hope on the bio-based plastic circularity being degradable or not, but in fact, most of them now are not degradable in the water or even in non-industrial facilities, and they're disrupting their existing mechanical recycling systems of fossil-based. So there's a lot of gray area there, a lot of hope, but a lot of really question marks whether this can work at all. And the data revolution, I think, encompasses all across the sector. We have a problem of data availability and quality, and maybe that's an opportunity for all of us to contribute in that direction. So that was a very fast run and a very high-level summary of the opportunities and challenges. We're working on research on practitioners and translating that into action on the ground through informing policy. Hopefully, you can have a useful debate later on. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Costas, for a quick summary of your contribution in this area, covering from this contribution to data revolution to policy aspect. I think the both Professor Rhee and Costas' presentation have very similar echo, that there is a need and opportunity for circular economy, and especially in the more upstream measures like design for the environment. Both of you mentioned about the considering more carefully about the alternatives and promising alternatives. That is exactly about design for the environment. And also, although there is growing development in policy, but those are still very much focusing on the developed economies. So how we can tackle and collaborate more with the global south is a big challenge, I think. And having said that, we also have a very good panelist who is from the World Bank, and he would introduce how World Bank is seeing this opportunity from decarbonization. We see that the climate change issue is much earlier than the plastic which is mainstream, and we can probably learn from this experience and also what is the plan for the global south. So Mr. Thierry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hotta-san. Thank you all. I want to introduce myself first of all. To the contrary of my colleagues, I'm more of a practitioner. I mean, I've worked mostly on the ground in developing countries for the World Bank for about 15 years now, working on waste management projects almost exclusively. Now, this aspect of solid waste to me is something very concrete. I have learned a lot from the ground and worked my way up to have more of an elaborate vision of the situation. And I'm going to try to explain very quickly what the World Bank is doing to work on the decarbonization of the sector. Should I share my screen?
Please.
Okay, can you see my screen properly?
Yes.
Okay. So very quickly, the decarbonization of the waste sector is part of a wider agenda from the bank to reduce GHG emissions, which is now a systematic approach in everything the World Bank does. And it's applied very thoroughly, meaning that any project, including waste management project, go through extremely stringent guidance and screening to assess the GHG reduction associated with the project. And that screening is based on standardized tools as well as internal tools to assess whether the project has a substantial impact or not on sector decarbonation. This being said, on the solid waste itself, what we try to do is to look at, to leverage any aspect of the sector that could reduce the carbon footprint. And this starts, let's say, with reducing waste itself. Waste production is associated with, let's say, the wealth of a given community. The more that community has disposable income, the more they produce waste. And as, let's say, global organizations are fostering global growth, they're also fostering global waste generation. Okay, this sounds a little paradoxical, but when we try to reduce poverty, we actually increase waste production. Not really a problem as long as we have the financial and technical means to manage that waste. And in developing countries, what you mentioned earlier as the global south, there is a huge gap between the waste that is generated and the capacity to actually manage that waste, including the possibility to introduce valid circularity within the system. And that's the gap Costas was actually talking about. That gap is huge. That gap is huge. Can we close that gap? I am not sure we can. At the moment, we are not seeing the end of the tunnel, which means in this case, the complexity of the systems associated with actual recycling or circularity and the costs associated with that technology makes circularity probably more wishful thinking than an actual possibility. In that context of the global south, it makes products that are, let's say, weakly recyclable, not directly recyclable, such as plastics, makes it appear as a design flaw. So when we talk about working on the upstream of the value chain in waste management, that's exactly what we're talking about. If we cannot recycle plastics, because that's basically what we focus about today, then let's not put plastics on the market, because we know that the global south doesn't have the possibility to actually capture it, collect it, and recycle it. So it's really an issue. And that redesign aspect, working on the upstream of the value chain, is key to eliminating the problem for now. Now, in terms of policies, these policies, and you see it, are slowly drifting toward banning plastics. And what does that mean? I mean, it should say its name. It's actually a way to phase out plastics, because governments and organizations such as the World Bank see the limitations of introducing the circular economy at a valid cost and with suitable technology. So the only solution that we resort to is usually to say, well, let's ban plastics. Well, I'm not saying we should ban plastics. I think we should rethink. I think we should slowly phase out plastics, whatever time and probably thinking it takes. But that's the only way we see that problem being solved in these, let's say, weaker economies. So I also want to talk about, after that, let's say, plastic chapter that I want to close now, talk about the other aspects that are very, very significant, is also transportation. I mean, today, the systems that were described in developed economies involve a lot of streams, very complex processing steps, from dual stream collection, sorting, processing, reprocessing, etc., etc. That involves a lot of shipping, a lot of hauling, and that is, you know it very well, only based on fossil fuels, whether it is the shipping, whether it is the transporting, and very often even the energy involved into the reprocessing. So if we can limit the transport of waste by looking at local solutions, working on decentralized waste management systems, I think is going to cut a significant part of the emissions associated with waste. That takes local solution, simple solutions, leveraging social capital and communities rather than technology. Now, open loop, which is to me really a problem. Open loop is often seen as circularity. To me, open loop is not circularity. It's when you use plastics to make products that are no longer recyclable after that. So you're basically breaking the loop. I mean, an open loop is not a loop. And when a lot of countries says, oh, we do achieve circularity by using plastics as fuel, well, to me, that's not circularity. That's basically, instead of burning fuel or fossil fuels, they're burning plastics. But that comes down to the same conclusions in terms of emissions. So I'm not really in favor of open loop. I think we should have a clear discourse and really distinguish open loop from closed loop. There is a huge difference, specifically regarding plastics. And I think the statistics today show open loop as a way to, let's say, recover material or as a form of recycling. It is not. It is not. And it's giving a warped idea of what can be done with plastics. And in that case, even in Europe, I think we should revise the approach regarding plastics and saying that waste to energy, in this case, is not a way to recycle plastics. Lastly, material quality. I think if we want good circularity, I think we have to focus on the quality of material that is used. Of course, packaging manufacturers always trying to get the cheapest material to manufacture goods, or the cheapest acceptable products to manufacture goods and packaging. I think we have to review this and make sure that from the design to the production, the quality of the material actually is compatible with circularity. And so no more cheap plastics, because this is going to cause a huge problem down the line, shifting the costs from the private sector onto the public sector. And that's my problem. Working for the World Bank in the urban global practice, we worked with municipalities, we worked with countries, and what we see is that the waste management is actually today in these developing countries shifting the costs from the private sector, that is cutting costs on the selection of material they use, their production processes, onto the municipalities that really have to deal with these costs. And extended producer responsibility is really slow. It really virtually never happens. And we see that the ones paying the cost are the users and not the producers. So that polluter pays principle, I think it's kind of old school. We haven't heard that for a long time, but we got to go back to basics and really make sure that the people putting these products on the market are fully responsible for what happens down the line, because communities do not have, in developing countries, the financial means to deal with that waste. And the bank is actually facing that tsunami of waste and plastics that we don't know what to do with. So sorry for being a bit long. Very happy to be discussing this topic. You see, I probably am as passionate about it as my previous colleagues, and happy to respond to any question you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your very passionate intervention. I have set a series of questions, but I got in the Q&A session that the interesting questions. So first, let's address these. First question is to Professor Rhee, that about EU's plastic tax which is set 0.08 euros per kilograms, which is not recycled, and how this tax rate set? That is a question. Is there Professor Lee can answer, or is there any EU colleagues who can answer this question?
First, I'd like to mention about that.
Okay, please.
Okay, they consider what the pigeon tax, but pigeon tax is not like this kind of high level of tax. So this 800 euros per ton is very, very high. So in that case, they reduce the plastic waste. If you got the small tax, but it doesn't work at all. So if you based on the pigeon tax, it's kind of smaller than this kind of tax. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, thank you very much. Then another question is on Africa. So Africa is one of the consumers of the different plastic utensils. And okay, basically the question is, there is a big business for single-use plastics. How we can possibly reduce such consumption? Because there's a big business. Also, maybe there's some, how to say, convenience over it.
It is not easy to reduce the plastic materials, but you must understand it should be reduced the plastic waste. So government make the awareness to the public. So they teach, they got some kind of it's educational program for the children's kindergarten or early elementary grade children's. But in that case, that is they understand why we reduce the plastic product. Also, in developing countries, and they try to use this kind of plastic. So I think that is the most important thing is the public movement to reduce the plastic uses. So that is my response.
Thank you, Professor Lee. And I agree that early level education is very much useful for changing the behavior of consumers. And for example, like Japan introduced such kind of waste-related education in the elementary school, like let them like separate their waste and also let them clean up their classes. That also probably influencing the behavior of the Japanese people related to waste. Anyway, thank you for your intervention. And also I had some question about pandemic impact and also like green recovery, but let's keep it until the Dr. Sora's presentation. So we still have some time, so I'd like to share my comments or question. So what we heard from all of you is very importance of the design for the environment and upstream measures. And we listen partially the answer from the Dr. Thierry, but I'd like to listen about how waste management expert can contribute to such kind of, how to say, more upstream related measures. And this is also related, second one is also related, how should emerging and developing countries can, how to say, cope with these new needs? I mean, we heard from the Professor, Dr. Costas, and also from the Dr. Thierry that there is still like lots of gap between the policy needs and actual infrastructure ready for the developing countries. how these countries can or like should cope with these new needs for the more upstream measures. Yeah, let's keep these two questions. Is there anybody want to answer one of these or like two other questions? Costas? You are muted.
Thank you. Sorry, muting myself. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think we had excellent presentations, and thank you also, Thierry, for very sobering presentation that talks things as they are on the ground. And I think that's super important. We have to take that seriously into account in our way forward. I think the design for environment and upstream measures are really totally connected to the waste, to the classic, traditional, more narrow solid waste and resources management, resources recovery sector. Because you see the problem we're having when it comes to processing this waste. What we end up with a bunch of materials that are mixed together and cross-contaminated also from use. We don't know what's their chemical composition. We don't have effective ways to separating them despite 150 years of research and development and all the revolution in robotics and artificial intelligence. So what happens is the waste sector gets something that is totally mixed, unknown, and is trying to separate it and make it back to what it was. So is investing huge amount of resources to reinstate its cleanness and understanding of what the material are to get them back on a closed loop or any form of utilization. So I think if we're serious really about it, we need to tackle this inherent variability about the waste, how the waste arrives into the waste processing, and outsource separation is one prospect, but these relies just to the judgment of citizens who are not experts, so we're making loads of mistakes. So in a sense, we need to improve this interface of when things are becoming waste and reduce the variability there. But most importantly, all the material designers and the product designers and the retailer sector has to work really with the waste management sector, understand the challenges we're having in closing that loop, and create a system that is far more effective. At the moment, we're far from there, I think, and there is not enough interaction between the knowledge and the failures the waste management sector is experiencing to be fed back into the design for the environment. And I could take the other one, but I'll pause here so that more colleagues have the opportunity to.
Yeah, thank you, Costas. Then Professor Rhee.
I agree with that. I think the presentations we had so far was very interesting. The problem we have here is limiting circularity to the just waste management. Circularity is, of course, goes far beyond just management of resources, management of waste. I think we need to bring in other issues such as food, energy, water, waste also. The reason I say this is simply because when it comes to a city manager or a mayor of a city, I think he or she is really concerned with a whole range of issues, and trying to implement a circular economy purely from a waste management perspective may be a little short-sighted as far as the mayor is concerned. I've been working with a lot of local governments in Southeast Asia, and my experience always has been that we need to provide a justification of why circularity is an important issue. So when we look at waste management contributing to transition of a circular economy, I think we have to really show its interlinkages to other issues, other problems that the the mayor faces. And I think that will be very critical for the implementation of circular economy policies.
Okay, thank you, Harry, for a very interesting perspective on the, how to say, overarching strategy is necessary, and then like local government level intervention, especially like leaders like mayor can play a role. But at the same time, I have some comments. Usually when you talk to the mayor about the resource efficiency and so on, so they only say like, we have this waste related issue, and they cannot connect to the other issues. It's very difficult issues, I think. And then also I'd like to listen to the Mr. Thierry about this, because he has lots of the experience in the, how to say, collaborating with probably with cities and so on. How you try to expand the agenda of waste management to more circularity, resource efficiency, lifestyle change? Do you have any good experience from your experience in World Bank?
That's a good question. What we try to do is really to involve communities. I mean, we see municipalities to have extremely weak capacity to address waste management. They are usually completely overwhelmed by other issues and waste management, such as health, education, transportation, and it seems like waste is lower on the agenda, and it seems fairly neglected on the municipal agenda in the developing world, which is understandable. Now, still, we have to do the job. We can't just let the waste accumulate. So how do we do it? Well, we can address the problem by leveraging the social capital, using communities, using families to deal with the waste directly. They are the first link to tackling the problem, and then we see what is left for the municipality to do, hoping that communities will alleviate the burden as much as they can. Now, this being said, and coming back to what I said earlier, we are now seeing that the more we move forward with development, the more waste we have to deal with. I mean, in fairly substantial proportions. And so we've tried to go back to manufacturers. We've tried to go back to actually the industries putting these products on the market. And strangely enough, and I don't know if my colleagues can reflect on that, I've had countless discussions on recycling, on circularity, on plastics, and strangely enough, the manufacturers, the industry is always or almost always absent from these discussions, meaning that the people, the upstream of the value chain, the people actually designing these products and putting these products on the market are never part of the panelists and discussions. And I think at some point we'll have to confront these people, the industry, and I'm not going to quote names because that probably would not be fair, but we all know who's putting tons of plastic bottles on the market, tons of diapers, tons of things that are not even recyclable, and these people are never part of discussion. They hide between a curtain of associations, NGOs, etc. But let's say there is still a huge work to do with these people, and we have not even scratched the surface today. So that's my conclusion on what to do in developing economies, because the downstream of the value chain is not gonna cut it. I mean, it's like aiming a fire hose at the teacup. These economies will never be able to cope with that flow of waste. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting, your opinion, because like concerning the climate change, like we have lots of evidence, science-based evidence is accumulated. Also, like what would happen in the future is like analyzed a lot. That's why that we could also make the business to take action, or business to sit with experts or like communities to tackle these challenges, I think. So we can learn from that experience, and then like plastic related issue, waste related issue, we start to accumulate such kind of data thanks to the work done by, for example, by like Costas and others. So that I think this is a good timing to again to engage the more upstream players for the discussion on circular economy. Yeah. So it's very exciting, but still we have 3 more exciting panelists. So let's close this discussion session for the time being, and then let's continue in the second round. So thanks for the speakers and panelists. Let's move on to the second group of round of the discussion. Thank you very much. So then I like to invite Dr. Sora about, again, very exciting topic about how COVID-19 pandemic impacted to Korean waste management and much wider kind of implication to the society. So Sora-san, floor is yours. I think Sora-san, you are muted.
Thank you for inviting me. It is as an international symposium. I'd like to present the effect and policies of COVID-19 pandemic on resource circulation in Korea. Actually, the waste problem is one of those affected by COVID-19. These 3 types of waste affected by COVID-19. So personal protective equipment. Second, plastic packaging waste. Third one is medical waste. Actually, I'd like to focus on packaging waste in this case. In 2020, last year, when the COVID-19 spread, parcel delivery and food increased significantly, resulting in an increase of packaging waste. The situation in Korea is the same. It can be seen that whenever the number of COVID-19 patients increases, the delivery food increase is very significantly. In Korea, the increase of paper waste due to parcel delivery was very highest, followed by the increase in plastic for packaging food and packaging material. These plastic waste contaminated with food, so it is difficult to recycle in Korea. And in other hand, the amount of food waste has decreased due to the decreases in eating out and increase of convenient food in Korea. In this presentation, I'd like to explain about the pandemic impact on policy effort and effectiveness of resource circulation policy after the pandemic. I asked the 30 stakeholders consist of academia, government, industry, and civil society. We asked them the selection of resource circulation policy type for 20 policies First one is prevention and reduction of waste generation. Second one is expansion of recycle and resource circulation. Third one is both of, it means 1 and 2 policies. So they choose the 3 of them, 1 of them for 20 policies. And they assess the pandemic impact for the policy efforts from negative impact to positive impact. We use 7-point Likert scale. And then they assess the policy implementation in the living with COVID-19 era. They choose the negative from negative effect to the positive impact. This is the result. The government effort to ban the use of single-use plastic has been negatively impacted by the spread of COVID-19, which in fact has resulted in increase in the use of single-use plastics. However, the citizens' actions on hygiene quarantine stabilized. They started use reusable shopping bag and reusable cups in the coffee shop. Moreover, the citizens are starting to feel the problem of increasing waste is very serious due to the spread of COVID-19. Now they are making effort to reduce waste. In the sense, it is effectively positive in the promoting most reduced recycling policies after the pandemic. This is summary and discussion. Food contaminated plastic is difficult to recycle, so we must firstly try to reduce them. In addition, the measure should be taken to respond to the increase of online shopping and increase of food delivery. It is necessary to build a business model that enable packaging free shopping and reusable container shopping in circular economy. In addition, the technology development for material replacing plastic and whether the materials are environmentally and economically superior should be evaluated. These policies are expected to work well after the pandemic. Thank you. I think I used 5 minutes.
Thank you, Sora-san, for very interesting experience and your analysis on the COVID pandemic and its impact to resource circulation policy in Korea. This is a very important and still ongoing area of the work. So you are very quick, how to say, like a result coming from the Korean experience is very informative to us. Then another kind of disaster related issue, climate-driven disaster is especially for this global south, and then like a country like Japan is increasingly faced. So Professor Rhee will share his thoughts on how these disaster-related risks are impacting to the circular economy, waste management, and so on.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to share my screen. Sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but it seems like still processing kind of.
Sorry, let me. Okay, I think I'll have to share it without full screen. Ladies and gentlemen, my topic actually is on disaster waste management, not disasters per se. My main message here is really disaster waste is not about waste itself, but there is a need for understanding the larger issues, especially in terms of linking it up to climate change and other issues. Most of my presentation today is based on my work in the United Nations, particularly the United Nations Environment Program and the UNDAC, United Nations Disaster Resistance Coordination Mechanism, that is usually put in place immediately in the aftermath of a disaster. Much of my work is based on the Hanshin Awaji earthquake right here in Kobe, where I'm based, but also the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004 and the Great the Great East Japan earthquake that took place in Tohoku in 2011. What the main issue that links all these disasters together is essentially the fact that they are multi-disaster. It's not just an earthquake or a tsunami, but it's an entire cascading range of disasters that have distinguished these things, and in terms of the amount of impacts that it has had. For example, the Tohoku disaster was not just the huge humanitarian impact that it had on the lives and lifestyles of people, but it also had a number of environmental impacts that is probably interesting for us here. For example, the pollution of water sources and the impact of fisheries and lifestyles, coastal ecosystems, and also the impacts of earthquake itself on the amount of waste it generated, the productive systems, how it impacted agriculture, damage to natural landscapes. It also had, there were secondary disasters from the Tohoku earthquake that includes landslides. A number of the hilly areas around Tohoku were actually affected by landslides. There were a number of fires and industrial accidents, etc. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there is a whole range of invisible impacts of a disaster that doesn't get sufficient attention either from the governments, from the local governments, or from the media, the people itself. Humanitarian aspects, of course, take a huge chunk of the attention. But for example, the topic of my presentation, debris and disaster waste, is a very critical, invisible aspect of a disaster that affects a community's ability to, in fact, recover from a disaster. So proper disaster waste management has huge implications on the ability of a community to recover from itself, to restore their lifestyles and their communities. I think it becomes a very important term, especially in terms of long-term planning. And that's why disaster waste, as you can see in this photograph here today, is becoming more and more important. And many times it's called a disaster in disaster. The debris, how do you set up a system to manage debris and waste, disaster waste? For example, the total volume of waste generated from the Tohoku disaster was almost 22 million tons. Same with Kobe earthquake. Here, 14 million tons of waste that almost took 3 years to be processed. And that's a huge challenge that mostly falls under the purview of a local government, because most of the debris clearance becomes the responsibility of the respective local governments. So some of the emerging challenges that we see in terms of disaster waste management is for example, the temporary storage. What do you do with all the waste there? How do you store it? How do you clear the communities so that recovery can start? Mixed debris. For example, the photograph that you see here, there's actually, it's hidden within the center of the photograph. There's actually a truck that is mixed with concrete, with organic waste, and so many other mixed debris. Sorting becomes a major issue. Debris processing, how can a local government actually process and separate all these wastes, etc. A number of these that you can see on the screen here are challenges that local governments face. But there is a number of emerging strategies that have been implemented. We can see quite strongly, especially local governments, trying to estimate what kinds and volumes of debris will be generated from a particular disaster. Of course, we also have to remember that different disasters generate different kinds of debris. That is something that we need to keep in mind when we estimate the volumes and kinds of waste that will be generated. How a waste separation system at source, how can communities themselves separate the debris and disaster waste that is generated from their residences, make an inventory of heavy equipment, etc. Especially interesting lesson from Japan that has come out is how local governments can collaborate with each other in terms of helping each other manage debris. For example, in the case of Kobe, many of the surrounding cities, including Osaka, Kyoto, and other cities, sent in heavy equipment in order to help the Kobe city itself manage its waste, etc. Now, what is of particular interest for us here is the how disaster waste management and waste management in general can be linked together. How can disaster waste issues be incorporated and upscaled to bring in a broader perspective to the disaster waste management? For example, composting. Composting happens as a matter of course within waste management strategies, but disaster waste also generates a lot of organic waste, trees and plants and other agricultural waste. How can the composting mechanisms that are there at the local level also be upscaled, upgraded, if you want, to include disaster waste, organic waste also? This happened in Banda Aceh, for example, after the Indian Ocean tsunami. One of the first things that the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, set up was actually an organic waste processing plant, which shredded the organic waste into smaller pieces that could then be composted and used by the local farmers. But of course, the bigger issue there is how can the existing waste management systems of a local government be upgraded in order to look after waste management, disaster waste as well. Again, to take the example of Banda Aceh, the local waste management system was very weak even before the tsunami. And once the tsunami happened, it was completely, the city was simply not able to handle the volume of waste that was generated there. So what we need to look at is in effect, the whole issue of looking at both pre-disaster and post-disaster issues. How can we plan for disaster waste? How can we promote a circular economy that also includes waste management, disaster waste, for example, but also recycling, reuse, and composting issues from a post-disaster perspective. Disaster risk management, risk reduction, DRR, disaster risk reduction, is also a huge field that has gained a lot of attention from governments, both national and local governments in the Asia Pacific region, for example, basically because of the amount of disasters that we have been facing. This disaster risk reduction, again, is risk reduction in terms of making sure that people have less worries in terms of the disaster, especially the multiple disasters that I mentioned earlier. So in terms of linking up disaster waste management and risk reduction, some of the emerging issues, for example, was the how to store hazardous and toxic materials. Surprisingly, we hear a lot about the Indian Ocean tsunami in terms of the tsunami damage, but we don't hear about the industrial accidents that took place in Banda Aceh and surrounding areas, basically because of the way in which the oil and hazardous and toxic chemicals were being stored, contamination of land and water, handling of medical waste, which Sora Sensei was also talking about, and building waste such as asbestos. These are all risks which are associated with disasters, but are also linked closely to disaster management. Again, there are several emerging strategies in terms of pre-disaster and post-disaster. How can we handle waste properly so that the risks associated with these wastes can be reduced? Make sure that you have proper impact assessment systems. As a member of the UNDAC teams, UNDAC is the UN Disaster Assistance Coordination System. Experts are sent into the field to assess the damage that happens within 24 hours of a disaster. For example, my role will be to understand the impact of a disaster on the environment, local environment, and provide advice to the local governments on how they can restore their environments. Disaster risk reduction is a very important strategy, a tool that local governments need to possess. And what is important for us here in this symposium is to link disaster waste into risk reduction strategies itself. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, I want to also bring in the issue of disaster waste management, climate change adaptation. Climate change adaptation is very broadly gaining attention now, particularly with the Paris Agreement and the IPCC reports. A number of strategies have been promoted in terms of climate change adaptation. CCA, habitat prevention, for example, maintaining water resources, restoring wetlands. These are all strategies for climate change adaptation. But there is a very clear input for waste management that can be applied into these strategies. A simple example, again from Banda Aceh, is the fact that they used a lot of the large concrete pieces of waste that came out, that was generated from the tsunami, into rebuilding some of the reefs, coral reefs that were around Banda Aceh. Same thing happened in Thailand. A lot of the concrete and disaster waste was actually used to restore many of the coral reef habitats around in the coastal area. That is an important element, as you will fully agree, in terms of climate change adaptation itself, habitat restoration, preserving coastal regions, using composting, for example, to build green infrastructure, how to understand land use change in terms of the waste that is disaster waste, etc. And this brings us these three issues, waste management, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, brings us to a point where we need to understand these interlinkages between these issues. And particularly important for us here is how to use disaster waste in a much broader sense, not just in terms of afterthought. So disaster waste management is not just a single issue afterthought. We really need to understand these interlinkages within the overall umbrella of 3 Rs and circular economy itself. Of course, 3 Rs is not just reduce, reuse, recycle. It's part of a much larger conceptual basis for a circular economy. And we need to bring that into the perspectives of waste management in general, domestic waste, risk reduction, disaster risk reduction, as well as climate change adaptation itself. I think that's a very important element that we need. Bringing these issues together becomes important. And that, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to leave you with this GET policy matrix, this complexity of issues, the interrelations of issues, requires us to understand issues from different perspectives, bringing stakeholders such as governments, business and industry, civil society together at the global, national, and local level, and understanding what are the different governance, education, and technology systems that need to be put in place when it comes to policies. This is the kind of framework, a matrix, that is very attractive to local governments. In fact, this was developed, this policy matrix I developed during my work at UNEP. And it gives us an idea of how to understand who has to do what. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, I'm stopping
for the good discussion. Yeah, time for, and then thank you for a very comprehensive idea on how to link climate adaptation, waste management, 3 Rs, and especially your point on the disaster waste is not only about the waste. We can consider about this as a resources, and that is also coming from your experience in the analyzing the Japanese experience, and that is very useful information, I think. Thank you, Harry. Let's have a good discussion afterwards. And then we have also very interesting perspective from business. Nozaki-san is utilizing digital technology to monitor the waste and also to do some waste management, circular economy related business. So let's listen to his experience.
Thank you very much, Hotta-san. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. It is such an honor to be speaking here. I am Nozaki from Recotech, and I'll be talking about our use of digital technology to manage waste and contribute to a circular economy. So we are a company that has been offering hard and soft solutions in waste management and recycling. For example, we design waste and energy strategies for large music festival and install scale and compactors in commercial buildings. In an ongoing project with JICA, we have been testing solutions for dealing with municipal solid waste in Indonesia. With over 20 years of experience in waste management, I have come to the conclusion that integrating that between supply chain and waste stream is crucial, and study to develop our pool system. The idea is to provide these 4 aspects that manufacturers need to procure their materials: stability in quality, cost, volume, and most importantly, traceability. We are currently working closely with Kao, one of the biggest personal care product manufacturer in Japan, toward creating a process that truly circulates plastic resources. To facilitate management of necessary information, stakeholders in the recycling chain are required to share information via our digital platform, and the pool system makes this really easy. The main cost driver of PCR materials are collection and logistics. The pool system maps out the kind and volume of waste generated on the regional level, which allows us to organize collection routes with optimal efficiency. Our pool system also ensures traceability. CAO has already begun testing our PCR material in its toiletry bottles. We have been testing pool in several projects around Japan. This autumn, we were selected as an innovative business model by the Tokyo Metropolitan Bureau of Environment. We were expanding our project to all areas of Tokyo, collecting plastic films. Increasing the number of participants in a given area, greatly increasing the benefit for stakeholders. Outside of Japan, we are preparing to implement projects in Vietnam and Malaysia. In Vietnam, we are testing our urban waste visualization toward compliance with stronger EPR and recycling registration due to go into force by 2023. Working closely with Junk & Co., a waste paper collection and recycling business, we will implement our pool system at a number of urban locations to visualize waste and recyclable resources and test collection routes. In Malaysia, we have been collaborating in a research project with Tokyo University of Agriculture and University Putra Malaysia, visualizing the volume and kind of organic waste produced in cities, and providing data to design efficient waste management schemes. The pool system managed various parameters such as weather data, the scale of producers' facilities, and their type of business. By collecting such data, it is possible to predict waste generation using AI technology. We believe this data can be used to improve the efficiency of recycling processes. Provided manufacturers are willing to share material information on pool, we will also be able to trace individual products from the beginning of the supply chain. Although pool offers substantial traceability, there is always room for improvement, especially in terms of linking physical material to digital data and integrating such data throughout the recycling chain. Moreover, design incentive to encourage each stakeholder to share information is key, but we believe this is possible. The world population is increasing and resource depletion is a serious concern. Our goal is to contribute to sustainable development by building a system that enables resource circulation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nozaki-san. Thank you, Nozaki-san, for very interesting example from your business, and then utilization of information technology to improve the traceability and the other aspects related to waste and circular economy. So let's move on to the discussion, and the viewers can use a Q&A function to provide the questions to the panelists. We have very prominent panelists, so you can pose an interesting question. And I have one question about COVID-19. There is for the COVID-19 for overcoming COVID-19, that many countries now preparing green stimulus packages, and how these green stimulus packages are going to impact the circular economy. Is it negative or is it positive, or is there any ongoing discussion on this? Especially, we'd like to listen from the Korea's experience, either Sora-san or Professor Rhee on this point.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear your the word green.
Green stimulus package. So to make economy recover again, that countries are making lots of the, how to say, promises for the economic stimulus policy. And then like in the surface, it looks many policies like green, but is there any actual discussion? Is good for the green or good for the circular economy, for example, in Korea? Like, for example, Japan tried to promote more renewable energy as a kind of green stimulus package, for example.
이승희 교수님, sorry, I just asked the Professor Rhee. 이승희 교수님 그린 뭐라고 하는지 제가 못 알아듣겠는데요. 혹시 들리실까요?
And Mr. Hotta,
Yes.
and you must explain one more time to understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many countries now trying to put like an economic stimulus policy from recovering COVID-19 impact. Is there any circular economy related aspect in the green stimulus packages, for example, in Korea?
Until now, we don't have green stimulus incentive.
Oh.
We don't have that. So we just think about the climate changes to carbon neutrality.
Mm.
So I think that is very important point. To that is if you got some kind of connection between the carbon neutrality and green stimulus incentive. So I think I must, ask to my Minister of Environment in Korea to get some kind of this kind of incentive.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's
Okay,
interesting.
thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting answer. For example, Asari Sensei, do you have any idea on what Japan is trying to do in terms of the green recovery and circular economy? Asari Sensei, mute です。
So sorry. Yeah. So you want to?
Yeah. My question is, what Japan is now trying to do in terms of the green recovery and the circular economy? Do you have any kind of knowledge on this?
Not knowledge, but my kind of idea or thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel so many challenges on that topics or on that aspects. So especially I feel that the younger generation is very, very sensitive for the change, the paradigm shifts. So many people is now have interest on the circular economy or the decarbonization. And then I feel they are pushing our society to be more sustainable. Yeah, and also Japanese government is very keen for a kind of local SDG. So that concept has strongly related to the circular economy, including plastics or food waste or sustainable consumption, etc. So I feel the most important is that the younger generation.
Okay, thank you, Asari Sensei. Also, I have a question about digital transformation. Many of the challenges posed by the panelists, such as we need a better planning, or we need a more upstream measures designed for the environment. There is a data gap. Some of these challenges seems to be, how to say, like easier to overcome with support from digital transformation. Do you have any opinions on this? Anybody? Banai-san or Ozaki-san or?
Hi everyone, I'll be speaking on behalf of Ozaki-san. So digital transformation can definitely enhance the circular economy, we think. But the major challenges here is that encouraging manufacturers and other stakeholders to share information on a single platform is really difficult. So waste data pretty much links to a company's revenue. And it is really difficult to convince companies to select, to share that kind of data on a platform that also involves their competitors as well. So although like our platform selects what data to show each stakeholder, this still remains a large challenge in terms of data security and implementing our system and also our projects.
Okay, yeah, it's always like when we have such kind of information sharing is necessary, that always the challenge is such kind of information sharing cannot be made because of the, how to say, interests of the business. And then this may be like a need to change because like more and more available information and data is actually opening up some new business opportunities. And I think that one of the key of the digital transformation is on that aspect, data availability, making a new business opportunity. But anyway, so we have a very limited time. For the final round, I'd like to ask anybody, very short comment, what is your idea on the future research needs for the waste management and circular economy? Anybody, like Haruhi-san? You unmute, please unmute.
Sorry, I was just wanting to make a quick comment on the previous question, but also lead into your question now. Essentially, the fact that, for example, businesses are reluctant to share waste data with the broader public is an issue that I have found quite frequently. Basically because they always can say that, oh, this is proprietary information that is associated with the manufacturing, we can't give you that data. But having said that, what I found very interesting was the role of local governments. If local governments push these businesses with regulations, with laws, etc., from the top, and from the bottom, when consumers force the private sector to take action in terms of demand-driven, demand-driven requests, these two would force manufacturing to change their attitudes, to change their approach, and to bring in issues of circularity. So these three stakeholders, local governments, businesses, civil society, consumers, working together, I think is a model that we need to really explore as a group. That's one thing. Different stakeholders, but also different actions, whether it is laws and regulations and rules we are talking about, whether it is awareness and education we are talking about, or is it technology, whether it is technology development, technology research, product development, eco-products, eco-labeling. All these issues need to be brought out into a framework that is easier so that we can easily understand who has to do what, whether it is stakeholders, whether it is actions, whether it is at which level we are talking about, whether it's at the global level, whether it's a national level, or whether it's at the local level.
Okay, so Costas?
Yes. Thank you, Hotta-san. And I think I'll try to connect a few things on the digital side. And I heard you saying the challenges when you were trying to make the local authorities, for example, understand the interconnectivity and the upstream recycling. We heard our colleague from the World Bank saying that local authorities don't have resources, and even at higher level, at regional, they don't have the resources. We heard Hari-san telling us that we could use them to put pressure to the companies upstream and things like that. And we've seen the Recotech excellent effort, and I have to commend your efforts because I've been proposing something like that, and I see you start implementing it. So the future is information. Information is power. As has been explained, a lot of information is withheld because of competition law or actual commercial, if you like, advantages and that is bringing. So we have to find ways to create a playing field across the circular economy ecosystem, from classic waste management to all the other sectors, and also those who are concerned with the plastics pollution and the challenges of disasters of waste getting into the environment in an uncontrolled way, and make a field that nobody is disadvantaged. Business can be made, money can be made across locally and globally, but also the environment and public health is protected. So I think to this, all stakeholders can play a role, and we need to see this greater data availability, reliability, and transparency, enabling the circular economy. And I think all of us have a lot of work to do in combined, collaborative, across sectors, across circular economy initiatives. So I'm sure there will be more efforts in that, and I think we will jointly can kind of contribute something to that.
Thank you, Costas. So we have very limited time, but from Korean side, any thoughts, Professor Rhee?
Yes. I think that it is very important to make the established global partnership between the waste management. And so there is the developing countries. Also, there are the developed countries, and there is the the working together to build something. Is the is a fruitful result. So we talk about the sustainable development goals, but this kind of meeting should be sustainable. So I thank you for Professor Asari, and thank you for Dr. Hotta working together. So I hope to get this kind of meeting is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very good concluding remark. That certainly that the time is very limited. Although we took 2 hours, it seems like we have much more to discuss, but the time is limited. So thank you very much, all the panelists. We hope we can continue such discussion in the next 3 links meeting. And for the official closing, we like to have concluding remark from the president of the Korean Society and president of Japan Society. So first, President Rhee from the Korean Society's remarks. Who is going to share this?
Okay, thank you very much, Hotta-san.
Yeah.
So, Yoshimura-san, can you share the video?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Seung-Whee, the president of Korean Society of Waste Management. Before I speak the remark to this international section, I'm very sorry about missing this international section, unfortunately, because I have a meeting in the Chuncheon city that is 2 hours from the Seoul. First of all, on behalf of the Korean Society of Waste Management, we congratulate the 32nd anniversary of conference of the Japan Society of a Symposium for paradigm shift toward the sustainable. Today, as I know, we have gathered here the celebrated 25 years of a partnership between the Korean Society of Japan Society. We working together for the last 25 years. Korean Society and Japan Society have made a significant process of researching and developing the solid waste management and related cutting-edge technologies. At this moment, the solid waste management sector also is being affected significantly by the consequence of the pandemic. The very materials are protecting us from the COVID-19 infection of the last year could ultimately cause long-term harm to the public health and the planet. During the pandemic, personal protection equipment, which is PPE, has driven the increase of plastic pollution. As a public health crisis countries, Korea, Japan, and many countries have experience of a sustainable increase in medical waste. In addition, with the rapid growth of the contact-free business, e-commercial packing waste generation is at an all-time high. Therefore, we know that sustainability is a solid waste is more official and more critical than after dealing with the pandemic waste to make the society of functioning in the future generation. We have to working together to solve this problem. By the way, I'm looking for the KSWM, GSMCWM joint conference continuous leadership in catalyzing and harnessing the collective wisdom of the two countries, scholars and all stakeholders towards the future agenda. So we need a very closely discussion also about the future agenda and aspects. Finally, I would like to express a sincerely appreciate the Yoshioka Toshiyaki, the president of Japan Society of Material Science and Waste Management, who keeps supporting the Korean Society of Japan Society of Relationship. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for Korean Society to share a video message from your president. And definitely we need to have a good collaboration in the future, as he said. Then finally, we'd like to invite Professor Toshiyaki Yoshioka, President of the Japan Society.
And first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for gathering this international symposium today. We had discussion about how to connect resourcing, cycling, and waste management to circular economy. And today's panelists have organized the current challenges of the plastic recycling and marine plastic issues, and the decarbonization, and COVID-19 pandemic, and the disaster waste management, and the relationship between the digital transformation and circular economy. And we have a lot of discussion for wide area. And then I received the current issue in addition. And Dr. Hotta made the whole process to smoothly. Thank you very much. And it is very difficult to come up with a direct answer through this symposium. But I think we are able to discuss its importance and direction as a common understanding. And the policy answers are very important, but I think that the academic and we gathered here are required to present scientific evidence and the various menu to properly secure the policy. Yeah, today's thank you very much to date. Yeah, and we proceed to go ahead to the in the future. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor Yoshioka, for great concluding remarks. So yeah, as Professor Rhee mentioned, that we need to have such kind of this kind of very interesting discussion to exchange information and then update our ideas on the how circular economy should be promoted. So thank you very much for your participation and active discussion. So Asari Sensei, よろしいでしょうか?
Okay, thank you very much all for your participation. That finally, I want to announce again about the next 3 links. Will be held March 14 to 18, 2022. So I want to make collaboration with the Korean Society and also other global associations. So please keep the schedule, and we can again discuss on these hot topics. Maybe today we can find out so many topics and so many academic maybe challenges to be approved. So thank you very much again, and see you next time.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.